I'm going to call to order the August 2nd, 2010 Board of Commissioners work session. At this time, I would ask that the Commissioner Privet has not arrived yet, but we'll see where we can get started. We can go ahead and get started. We got a quorum. We have the agenda before us, and what I'd ask is under, under new business, under G4, if we can move that to the end to allow others to present, as well as there was some discussion that we were going to have as it relates to the APPC meeting, if we can carry that to after that as well. So that will be G10. I do not see that on our agenda, but other than that, do we have a motion to approve the agenda as it is?
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
We have a motion. We have a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed. Motion carries. And then under the consent agenda, we have a motion to place the items under F, which is F1 and F2, onto the August 16th consent agenda.
So moved.
We have a motion. We have a second. We have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed. Motion carries. Next matter that we have to discuss today is G1, is the update on the jail inmate population, and that is found on page 12 of our work session. And at this time, I would call on Sheriff Riley and Chief Deputy Hunt.
Good afternoon. How you doing? Doing good. Just wanted to bring you up to speed on some of the jail numbers and some of the things that are going on to make you aware of it. I know we're still a little while out before we occupy the new facility as it's being completed, and at the same time, I think that we're in a very familiar situation that we were in several years ago before we opened the annex, in that we have already started, as you're aware of, shipping inmates out to other counties, and very similar situation that we were in several years ago, in that there's not anything very close around willing to take these inmates. Again, running the cost numbers, it certainly is a very easy way of shipping inmates as opposed to occupying the new facility. But at the same time, I want to give you these numbers, and at least if we get in much worse of a situation, then I'm not real sure that we may have to come back before you, sit down and talk about a different plan. Our numbers are a little bit better this week in that we've got about 336 inmates in our facility this week. We were up to 374 as our peak for several weeks ago, and again, that's occupying both facilities of a max of 238 beds. With the new facility, the new annex, 96 beds. We don't have that ability in the building structure it is. We don't have that ability to sleep them on the floor like we do in the old linear side. So again, what that does is all that overcrowdedness, all that extra goes to the old side. So we're seeing the same numbers that we saw before we opened that annex on the old side. We're sleeping anywhere from 100 or 80 to 100 on the floor at any given time. And what that does is that not only is it becoming grossly overcrowded, but again, the functionality of the facility, all the services that are provided there, from medical to food to cleanliness, liability, all of those different things are increased and heightened, and certainly something that needs to be looked at. I don't know that it's anything. I know that there's been some discussion, not in this forum, but about what's causing these numbers. And looking back to when we started having problems back in 2001, all the way back that far, I don't know that it's much different than it was at that time, in that we're seeing about a 10 to 15% increase in numbers of average daily population every year, and I think that has continued, maybe a little bit higher this month and last month, which may see our numbers inflate just a little bit for this year. But again, I still think we're in that 10% range of increase in our average daily population. But again, I just wanted to apprise you to the fact that we do have to take in consideration a number of things. As we look at these numbers, first of all, we have to look at our female population. Female population was up to 52 during this height in 374. What does that mean? That means that in our old facility, we had no more spaces that we would be able to open up. I mean, we're 80 to 100 males sleeping on the floor, and we're at the same time we were at our maximum number for females, which would have meant that we would have had to take over another male area and created that much more of a problem. On top of the fact, as I said, that we've 80 to 100 males sleeping on the floor. Now, again, the female population has dropped, but that's one of the things that we have to look at when we do occupy the new facility. What that would afford us is that we will dedicate 96-bed area to females, which would give us that much growth as we move forward. Just to let you know, we have been using a couple different counties to transport this time. We have worked out a somewhat a better agreement with Ashe County than the ones we had before, in the sense that we're paying them $40 a night per inmate as opposed to the 50 mark that we were with Alamance, Northampton, Gaston, some of those that we'd used several years ago. Those are not available as Alamance has pretty much, we were at the end of our contract with them several years ago and they were full. Gaston has since filled up. Rowan and several others that close to us have began using some of those other beds in the last few years to occupy them. We pretty much have resorted to using the Ashe County. They have guaranteed us a couple of things that work in our favor. Number one is $40 a night is not a bad fee. We also have the ability to take low-level felons there as long as they don't have medical conditions, which a lot of facilities won't allow any felons to transport there. I guess the lashback from that is that it's a 250 to 275 mile round trip for us to make 2 or 3 times a week to bring people to and from. They are guaranteeing us 50 beds, which should fix our numbers for now.
Although there's a guarantee, we only pay what we use.
We only pay for the beds that we use. And they did recently open up a new facility, which this is opportunities for them to repay themselves back for some of that money spent. Northampton has usually dedicated 20 to 40 beds to us. Again, no felons. That's a 500-mile round trip for us. That's not available right now. Northampton is just not open to us right now because of the no felons and some of the things we're experiencing. Henderson County did us a favor. They have some extra beds, but they dedicate those to their 287G ICE program that they have there. They did get us out of a fix and kept some of our inmates for 3 days at no cost to Cabarrus County, just to help us under a fix that we were in, as long as we promised to get those moved around. It gave us 3 days to be able to work out some of these other agreements. Rutherford County, again, 10 to 15 inmates, they're guaranteeing us at 50 a night. Transylvania County, 300-mile round trip. They will take low-level felons. They're 50 a night. And then Swain County, which is another 420 miles. So that's kind of what we're looking at. Again, when you start looking at cost, it doesn't compare to putting bodies in the new facility, but at the same time, there's a lot of risk, there's a lot of liability, a lot of different things that go along with that. And I just want to apprise the commission of that, so you'll have it in the back of your mind. So if we do have to start further discussions, or you decide that you wanted to do something different in the meanwhile, we're still looking at 12 months or at least 11 months of the current track that we're on.
Commissioner Poole?
How many do we have in other facilities at this current time?
We got
30 right now.
You have 30 right now. And we don't house any juveniles
right.
here, is that correct? Does that
That's
still
correct.
go to Gaston County? Or where do those go?
That's taken care of by juvenile services, and they find them beds and they take care of the transports to those juvenile facilities.
Do we pay for them to be?
They do.
Or is that, they do? Okay.
The only thing we do is assist with transport, or when they transport them back here for court, we help watch them during the court day.
And we won't be doing juveniles with the new facility, will we?
We will not.
Okay. I didn't think we would, but I just wanted to verify that.
Juveniles in the sense of less than 16. The federal government views a 16 and 17-year-old as a juvenile as well, so they have to be housed in a different manner. So
Are we still under still have an agreement with the state about the sentencing, and that if it's more than, okay. And
Yeah, we've been
that's-
under that standing full capacity letter for, I don't know, 10 years now.
Okay.
And that has not changed. Basically, that just means that every time we sentence, when we call transportation with the state and send those inmates to prison, we have to attach that certified letter stating that we're certified full.
Do we know what the numbers are as relates to people serving active sentences here versus waiting court? Is it 75-25% or any idea?
No, I would,
From what I checked today, it's right at 28 to 29% is actually serving sentence. But that changes when the backlog changes and we get to send people to DOC.
Right. Okay. Thank you very much. Any other questions for Sheriff Riley or Chief Deputy Hunt?
a couple other things that I made note about is jail inspector. Again, we've got at least 2 more of those every 6 months. There'll be 2 more of those in the next 11 months that, you know, it's an opportunity for the jail inspector to come in and gig us on overcrowding and, you know, how we've got space, but yet we're still overcrowded there. I don't know what kind of liability that could pose. Our jail kitchen, we've constantly worked with, currently we're patching and repairing the kitchen on the old side in lieu of the fact that we have a new kitchen on the other side and we'll be occupying it. There's no sense in spending $30,000 on new equipment to repair that. But most of that equipment in the old jail is 20 plus years, and it's wearing, and we are seeing large equipment go to the wayside as we wait. Some of the other concerns that just to throw out there to think about is that again, some of the equipment in the new side there sitting for a year without use, or maybe some training that we can do on it in 6 months. I just want you to have all the information. Again, we talked about you know, some of the other. I know we ran into a problem with reducing when we started the efficiency on the heat and air efficiency of reducing the heating air in facilities that are not being occupied after 5 o'clock, and that was done in the courthouse. But yet the heat and air for our holding facilities in the old jail is attached to that, so we had to go back and figure out a way to continue that service. Just a lot of different little things that go together and make this a very difficult situation when you're grossly overcrowded. And again, I think we're at a point now to where we're a bulging balloon. I wouldn't say that we're at the point where we're going to break, but again, 11 months, not sure what that spells for us, and I want us to be prepared to where if we needed to do something, that you would be aware of where we're at, where we came from, and that we could do something to minimize our problems.
Any other questions? Thank you, Sheriff Riley. Thank you.
All right.
I would suggest that we keep tabs on this so that we can see what can be done to make certain that things don't get out of control. Under G2, page 13, is the Register of Deeds Redaction Services Agreement. Our Register of Deeds, Linda McAbee.
Good afternoon.
Hello.
I believe you have a copy of the Redaction Services Agreement between the county and Logan Systems of Greensboro. Just to add a few things, effective October the 1st, 2009, North Carolina General Statute 132-1.10 was amended to add a subsection F1, giving the Register of Deeds the authority to redact Social Security and driver's license numbers on any document that appears on the internet website that is available to the public. Logan will use OCR technology to redact those numbers from almost 4 million pages from 1935 through May of 2010. They will also redact day forward starting with June 2010 at no additional charge, as long as we remain a customer of their internet remote access service, which we are. Logan anticipates that the conversion will be completed 180 days after the signing of this agreement. I think this is something that we need to do for our citizens. And just to let you know that the payment for the project will come from the Register of Deeds Automation Enhancement and Preservation Fund. And I'm here today just to ask for your approval.
Any questions for Mrs. McAbee? Do we have a motion to place this under consent agenda on August the 16th?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion, we have a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed. Motion carries. That should be approved on the 16th, so you don't have to come back unless you'd like to.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Next matter that we have is G3, is the CVB presentation of the fiscal year 2010-11 marketing plan for Cabarrus County. And I would call at this time, I believe that Mrs. Carpenter, who is the head of the CVB president's already been introduced to everybody, but if you haven't, Mrs. Carpenter and Mr. Mills, from the vice president, we had this presentation to the board, the CVB board, June, I believe it was, beginning of June, end of June, beginning of July. I thought it was important for us to understand what the CVB is doing. So I'll pass it over to y'all.
Thank you. Thank you for allowing us to be here this afternoon. We're going to be short and sweet and to the point, and we will be open to any questions. We're not going to actually go through it. You have the actual marketing plan in front of you. As we have printed copies also if you would like to have one and need it for other things other than just today. So we would be happy to provide you with those copies. The reason we wanted to appear before you today is to give you a brief overview of the direction that we're going in this coming year, and just to let you know how important tourism is to our community. In the opening, in my president's message in this piece of publication, you'll note that $21.12 million were directly attributed to tax revenues collected, state and local tax revenues collected for Cabarrus County. And how does that affect you all as commissioners? Is this saves, it represents a $305 tax savings to each household in Cabarrus County. So without those tourism taxes being generated, each household would then have to pay that $305. And it's our goal that when we appear before you next year to present this marketing plan, that number is more. We hope to continually rise that number to have a higher tax savings to each of the residents every year. Just some fun things to let you know that aren't in here that just happened. My sales manager and I went to Ames, Iowa last week to do a presentation to the Buick Club of America, and we bid on this piece of business and we were awarded this piece of business, so we were real excited about it. And the national meet will be here in the end of June, 1st of July of 2012, and this will represent a minimum of 600 room nights to our community. And we just, off the heels of the National Corvette Restorer Society that we hosted here in Cabarrus County just recently, that sold out all of our hotel rooms on exit 49, and we should be doing more of this and plan on doing that in the future. Car clubs are a big hit for us, and we have wonderful facilities to be able to handle that type of meeting and convention, and we fully intend to continue to pursue that. I'm going to let John just touch on his year-end report on a financial end quickly, if you don't mind.
Absolutely. Most of the information in the financial report is relative to our discussions during the budget process a few months ago when we were here. One thing I will say is now that we are through 2009-2010 fiscal year, we are beginning our audit process. So once our audited financial statements are completed, we'll be presenting those to you. And we'll continue, as we have in the past, to submit quarterly reports to you that obviously details our financials as well as our activities and what we're doing at the Bureau. Demand continues to stay strong. We're still seeing increases year over year of about 19% right now. The rate that's being charged on those rooms still lagging a little bit, so that's something that we're obviously going to continue to try to drive as well. Again, drive the demand is very important. We're going to try to drive that rate to assist the hotels as well. And of course, as the biggest thing with the marketing plan, it does talk about the allocations and how we aligned our budget, and 61% of our budget being allocated toward marketing. And so this marketing plan kind of goes into that a little more detail. That budget that you received is actually about 45 pages of a lot of line item detail expenditures. And this kind of goes into the marketing section a little bit more, and it talks about some of the things that we'll be doing. So again, but we'll be continuing to send those quarterly reports to you as we go throughout the year. And of course, you'll get our audited financial statements once we get those complete over the next couple months.
And if you look in, after John's report in the marketing plan, it lists what our mission and our vision statements are. The mission statement for the Bureau is to drive visitation to Cabarrus County to generate the maximum impact through hotel stays and visitor spending. And our vision, we have a very lofty vision, and we hope we can reach that vision, and we know we will, to continually grow and sustain a dynamic travel industry to become the #1 economic force of Cabarrus County. And with that said, Michael Bonofsky is our Senior VP of Marketing, and he's going to just touch on some of the highlights of where we're going this year with our marketing.
Thanks. Good afternoon. With regard to the mission and vision, basically this plan lays the roadmap of our success and where we're going to take the CVB. So the plan essentially supports the research that we had conducted back in January with our hotel partners. They had asked us to create a survey. They helped us create the actual budget. And in doing so, in essence, the plan dovetails the results of that research that we had created. So therefore, this is a fully integrated marketing mix where we are looking at radio, we're looking at print, we're looking at PR, we're looking at communications, we're looking at electronic media, we're looking at social media. And when I say integrated, all these parts and components of the plan tied in together. So we're delivering our consistent message, our consistent brand. Our current branding theme right now is Where Racing Lives, and that's one of the exciting pieces for Cabarrus County, especially with the most recent success that Donna and Tracy had with the Buick Club, in addition to the Corvettes Restore Society. Continuing on, you'll see bits and pieces of the plan here talking about some of the specifics that we plan on doing as far as co-op advertising opportunities, U.S. Airways, USA Today, Our State magazines. We're looking at creating a co-op program to where our partners can benefit and share in our success.
How are you judging that, or how are you figuring out that the U.S. Airways?
We've got metrics in place that will measure our return on the investment. Let's take a look at featuring our website, for instance, and we know that this is being distributed to 350,000 readers in every plane seat back. We can gauge the metrics on that because we know how many people are coming back to our website, essentially requesting information on Visit Cabarrus, requesting information, requesting a destination guide. The marketing department, as it relates to the sales team, we are creating the collateral pieces. Again, based on the success of the Buick program, we did put together the program that enabled the sales team to go out, market the destination, and they were successful in doing so. From the communication standpoint, we're continuously looking to create newsworthy ideas, news stories, and we're creating a story bank. So when the opportunity presents itself, we've got stories in the queue. So we can take that opportunity and place some of those media hits for garnering future media in the marketplace. With regard to the electronic media, electronic marketing, our website, that's going to be a key component for our success for 2010, 2011. A couple tidbits of information here that 75% of households now have internet access, and 90% access the web at work, school, or the library. They decide where to travel, where they're going to travel to, and how soon they're going to travel. So we want that to be our primary focus, so we can offer and make sure that we're delivering something that they can't otherwise get closer to home. So we want to entice them to travel to our destination. Further into the plan, you will see the media plan as far as the trade show support, pre-post plan, some of the advertising buys, some of the placement. When we attend a trade show, we want to prepare that particular group or that association that we will be in attendance, and then we'll follow up kind of to further leverage our brand and make sure that they remember us. And
How do you plan on doing that?
as far as
When you go to these conferences, you go into these shows, how do you follow up? How do you know?
Sure. With Tracy's plan, this is more or less on the sales side. He's got pretty ambitious goals of getting 45,000 leads, so he's continuously he's continuously.
We have a little bit of a competition between the marketing and the sales team, as you can see.
So, we'll support
You get
him in
more than
that.
45,000 hits in a month, right? And he's looking at 45,000 leads a year.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
We'll, when we go out, when Tracy goes to these trade shows, he's sharing our destination guide, he's acquiring information, and then when he gets his leads in return, we can tell whether those trade shows are beneficial. In the past, we'd been attending very many trade shows with very little leads. We've been very strategic in nature in what trade shows we're going to attend for this upcoming year, and in doing so, we hope to get some of those returns, some of those leads in return.
We actually changed up from last year. We made a significant cut in our advertising budget from last year because we were advertising in everything, in every publication that there was, and not seeing any return on that investment. So we actually kind of realigned ourselves and said, okay, where are we going to get the biggest return on our investment? And just so you know, when we do make expenditures like that in advertising and what trade shows we go to, that is top of mind. What are we going to get for the money that we have invested into these things? And we want to be mindful of making sure that we are good stewards of the tax dollars that we receive. And we want you to know that we are mindful of that and want to recycle them threefold when they come in. So, anything else?
I do. I just want to close with a couple more comments. We're in an era of specialization. No longer are we going to provide we are going to provide itineraries. No longer are we just going to simply list the partners. We need to have these itineraries so when visitors come to town, they know exactly what they want, where they're going to go, and we can kind of plan out their days for them. It's kind of a neat piece. So, our success is going to revolve around the experiences and the immersive experiences and putting people in experiences that they otherwise can't put themselves in closer to their home.
Also, we have a listing of our partner events in this packet. We invite you to attend those at any given time if you are available. You don't need a special invitation. You're welcome to come to those anytime, and we encourage that. Also, what I would ask of you all to assist us is each and every one of you all are affiliated or a member of some sort of association, either in your business life or your professional life. And we're going to deem you salespeople today, honorary salespeople today. And I would ask that if you have those connections, the Buick Club is a prime example. We had a local person here in our community who is a member of, well, he's the president of the local Buick chapter. And he is the one that came to us and said, look, we'd like to host this national meet here in Cabarrus County. And so with that, we assisted him and that local club in being able to secure that event. We can do that with any of yours, your associations that you are affiliated with, and we would be happy to make that direct contact with those people. So we would appreciate it if you would give us a call sometime and let us know if you have any ideas. It saves on travel dollars also when you can book your meeting here instead of having to go somewhere else. So we'll be happy to do that.
Any questions, Commissioner Minot?
Not a question, a comment. I think you are to be commended for having both Corvette and Buick.
You're on my list of people to call, by the way. Thank you.
A couple of things that it may not have been on their plate to think that I thought was important is there's kiosks that are throughout the county, and one of the places is at the Lowe's Motor Speedway at the ticket office, which has been a very big hit. If you want to talk about that, and
Sure.
also the one at Concord Mills, I believe.
Sure. Of course, our main office is on Dale Earnhardt Boulevard, and we have our visitor information center there. But we also saw a need, just, attending the race and standing in that ticket area at the racetrack. I heard people walking up and saying, well, where do we go do this? Or what else is there to do? And, in between race times, and people who are staying in campgrounds and in hotels, how do we get down to the mall? Or, how do we get to downtown? And so we worked with the the Speedway and secured an area at the Speedway there in the main ticket floor, that we have a satellite office, a visitor information center there, and it's open during race time and during the times that they run their tours, their track tours. So we have someone there available to answer any questions from those people who are coming in from out of town. We're also in the beginning stages of staffing the visitor information booth at Concord Mills. That's not a new space for us. We've always had the information there. We've never actually staffed it. So according to research from the mall, during high traffic times, we will have someone stationed at that information center to give out Cabarrus County information and help drive those people. Not just, we realize that the overabundance of them is at exit 49, but they need to understand what wonderful, quaint municipalities that we have within this community, and how do we get them out there to see them. And that's what we're there to do, is to tell them all the other fun things there is to do in Cabarrus County.
We recently held, or not we, the county was sponsored, the county had the National Softball Tournament. Had 91
participants.
91 teams.
Teams.
That some were from West Virginia, South Carolina, a lot from North Carolina, so it was all over. That was out at Rocky River.
Mhm.
Donnie Broom's Top Gun
Right.
put that on, so I thought that was
Right.
important. And there was one other thing. Y'all heard about some money that's being set aside about how to develop or to work with possibly the parks and some of the fields or some of the lands that we have. And we got a presentation on some ideas about what's the best way to use that money when it becomes a point that the CVB board wants a recommendation to either that board or to the Board of Commissioners. So that was presented to us in June.
In June.
June.
Yes, sir.
So there's a lot of things going on there as well.
Right, and that's on our agenda to discuss also again. So, again, we just want to make sure that we're spending those dollars in the best way possible, that we can maximize additional dollars and additional visitor spending when we do those things. So,
And more than likely, coming up in September, there'll be a discussion about the expansion of the board, because I think that came through. So there's going to be 3 more seats that we're going to look at probably in September for our meeting in September.
yes, sir. I also brought a copy of our destination guide, and this used to be called a visitor guide. And in our brainstorming of putting this guide together, we started talking about it. And the number one reason, according to research, the number one reason people travel, and especially to Cabarrus County, is to visit friends and family. And so while we were talking, the big old light bulb went off in my head, and I said, well, if the number one reason people are coming to visit is to visit friends and family, and we're calling this a visitor guide, then we're automatically telling the local residents in Cabarrus County that this book isn't for them to look at, and they don't need to look at this. So we changed the name of it to a destination guide, and it talks about our destination. And I would encourage each of you to have this. We tried to make it nice and pretty so it'll look great on your coffee table. So when the in-laws come to visit, or family comes to visit and you don't know what to do with them, you can pull this out, and there's a million things in here that they can do, with or without you. So we encourage you to...
Preferably one or the other.
Exactly. We encourage you to take these if you would like these at your place of business. We will be glad to deliver them and have them on site. We'll give you holders or stands to put them in. And with that, you said these are in the corner for me, please. If we can ever do anything for you, we strive to be a transparent organization, and we are open to any questions and suggestions that you all may have at any given time. And we all have cell phones, and we'll answer them at any given time of the day. So feel free to give us a call. And we encourage you to. I'd love to hear more from you.
Any other questions? Donna, John, Michael, thank y'all very much for coming.
Thank you.
Next matter that we have is G5, which is the arena presentation. Instead of having Mr. Lapsley come out and present us, I thought we'd just come out on August the 16th. So do we have a motion to place this presentation on August 16th under presentations, recognitions, and presentations?
So move.
Second.
We have a motion, we have a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed. Motion carries. Next is G6, the transportation award of bids for routine maintenance of CCTS vehicles, as found on page 55 of our agenda. Mr. Bass.
Yes, sir. Good afternoon. Thank you for this opportunity. I bring a couple of items for you today. We went through an RFP process for routine maintenance for our vehicles, and our finance department, through our purchasing agent, worked with us on this whole process. We did receive responsive bids for this. The reason that we are bringing this before you now is that the potential is to have AURA funds involved in this, where we may get some reimbursement from the stimulus package, and it does have a requirement that is brought to the board for their approval. And what we would like to request is a motion to approve the awards to GMAX Automotive for the routine maintenance and grant services LLC for our lift services, and ask that the county manager be authorized to execute the contracts on behalf of Cabarrus County, subject to revisions by the county manager.
Are there any questions for Mr. Bass? Is GMAX here in Cabarrus County?
Yes, they are.
Good. Do we have a motion? We do not have to have a hearing on this as far as I know. Okay. Do we have a motion to place this under consent agenda
So
on
moved.
August? We have a motion. We have a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Thank you, Mr. Bass.
Okay, one more item.
And the
Okay.
next is on page 183, the Rural Operating Assistance Program.
That's also mine. What we're requesting is permission to hold a public hearing. Once again, this year, we have applied for our rural operating assistance for $245,632. This program is divided up between the Elderly and Disabled Transportation Assistance Program, the Employment Transportation Assistance Program, and the Rural General Public Program. We're asking that you allow us to hold a public hearing and a motion to adopt the FY 2011 Rural Operating Assistance Program Certified Statement.
Any questions for Mr. Bass? Does this cover the Cabarrus Links, or is Cabarrus Links separate
It's
from the?
separate.
Mhm,
Right.
Okay.
This is a different program.
Okay. I understand that ridership has exploded.
It has been wonderful. Last month, we broke another record. We had 725 individuals ride. In our first month of October, we started out with 23. So we've increased it, and it continues to grow each month. It's just it's been a wonderful program.
I don't
We
think the
appreciate your
CK rider
support.
system's growing that quickly, but they have a lot, quite a bit. But that's a great program, and that's y'all have adopted or adapted to pick up and drop off at multiple locations throughout, from Midland.
Mount Pleasant and
Mount Ple-
Harrisburg. Yes, sir. And as we have gotten feedback from the citizens on where their needs are, we've been able to make adjustments in the route so that we're now picking up where individuals are living. So realistically, they're leaving their automobiles at home, and they're using this service to get to and from employment.
And Ed, so I met with Mr. Bass last week, and I think that you were saying too that we've been able to establish with this links to Stanley and Rowan County systems, so that you now can move from one system to the other, or that you're also going and, delivering, taking some routes out of the county.
We are partnering with Stanley County. We're now utilizing the Rowan Express service that comes to Kannapolis. So our citizens are now transferring to that service and going directly to Salisbury from Kannapolis. And then in turn, when individuals are coming to Kannapolis, we're picking them up and taking them on to the hospital and other areas for them. So we have a good partnership, but it keeps more equipment in Cabarrus County, providing more services instead of having to take it over to somewhere else. So it's been very successful.
Wow, great job. Thank you very much. Do we have a motion to place this under new business, since we have to have a public hearing, and we should have one?
I move that we place in our new business and call for a public hearing on the rope funding request
We have-
for this year.
We have a motion, we have a second. We have a motion, we have a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Next is G8, is the approval and resolution authorizing the filing of an application for approval of a financing agreement for qualified school construction bonds. Mr. Day.
You'll recall a couple of months ago, the Board of Commissioners and the two school boards both approved the application that was issued to the Department of Public Instruction to issue qualified school construction bonds. As you'll recall from all the other times the county has issued bonds, our bond attorney provides us with a number of resolutions that must be adopted prior to the issuance of the bonds. This is the first one in that series, and it will need to be on the new business agenda.
I do not see that we have to have a call for a public hearing at this time, since there's no monies being issued or being indebted. Any questions? We have a motion to place this under new business.
So moved.
We have a motion, we have a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed. Motion carries. Next is the Board of Elections purchase or lease of the old Creamery building on Church Street, G9. That's found on page 179. Mr. Downs.
Yep. This item is to have the board make a decision. I believe it was the May meeting, the board decided to go with the Creamery as the new location for the Board of Elections. We're to the point now, in order for staff to move on, we need to know what the board's pleasure is, whether to purchase the Creamery building outright or lease it, and then also whether we want to purchase or lease. Do we want to go with a turnkey, meaning that the current owner hire a design firm and contractor to complete it, and we buy the building or lease the building already upfitted, or do we buy it or lease it as a shell and the county secure those services ourselves? You've got copies of the proposals from the Morrisons in your packets there, and I broke out, if we secure by lease, if we lease the building, the estimated cost to upfit is about $600,000, and that's based on $60 a square foot, so it could come in a little higher, a little lower. The Morrisons have agreed to fund half of that, so it would be an additional $300,000 to the county, and then the Morrisons would match that up to $300,000. If you look at the yearly rents, year one is $98,500, and then it's proposed to increase by 3% each year. Let me pass these out so you have these to look at. And it would increase to year 5 would be $110,863 a year, for a total for the 5-year term is $522,951 plus the original building upfit, so you would be making an investment of $822,951 if you go with the lease. If you purchase the building as the shell and its associated parking and lighting and sidewalks, the shell is $837,500. And again, the estimated upfit cost, whether the county does it or the current owner does it, is going to come in at about $1,437,500. And that, again, that's an estimated number just based on the estimated $600,000 upfit cost. And I can answer any questions that you have, for Mr. Morrison's here as well.
The exhibit that I have that is up on the screen, I believe that Mr. Morrison has a larger one.
Yes, I have it here.
If we can put that up so we can.
This is Church Street here. This is Church Street, this is the Creamery, and then the Coke building. We're looking at the Creamery building. This is the existing paint store here, the Sherwin-Williams store here. Access to the property is off of Peachtree Street and St. Mary Street. And the parking would include about 3/4 of this parking lot, half of that one here. I've got the exact drawing down there drawn out, but it would include the lighting, the sidewalks, and the parking lots. There will also be an opportunity for an agreement with the current owner and other leasees to use additional parking when needed, and then they can use ours as well if they have a special event.
Is there any additional cost in regards to using the additional parking spots during our peak times? Or is it just going to be, there's an agreement that we can enter into that we may share the cost in construction of the parking spaces, and then we just use them as needed? But we definitely got them designated for early voting and any peak times for the board.
That's
For the
correct.
elections.
Harris, you may want to come up and answer that question. I don't believe we were intending on any kind of condo fees or any additional common space fees. We were just, since we were going to both a reciprocal agreement, unless.
Right. There would not be any additional costs
Okay.
related to the parking during peak times.
But for
Yeah.
instance, whatever the peak times are, we can delineate saying October 1st through November 3rd, or 6 weeks prior to every election, we've got these designated spots. And if y'all are gonna have the Boy Scouts oyster roast, every year at this time for the oyster roast, y'all got the spots. That's what I'm trying to figure out.
We can definitely enter
Okay.
into something like that, yes.
Just to give you a little bit better idea here, the blue outlined area is the building, as well as these parking spaces. There's 1, 2, 3. There's 4, yeah. So they will be building these here. These are not in place at this time. They will be adding those as we go, as part of the purchase. These are currently in place. So they will go along with the building as well as these. So there's approximately, I don't know the
30,
exact number, 35
30 or 35, something like that.
spaces that will go, that we'll have all the time.
Okay.
And that will be more than sufficient 10 months out of the year, or
Mhm.
9 months out of the year. And then we have the access to these others as well, through mutual agreement.
Great. Any questions for Mr. Downs or Mr. Morrison? Any discussion right now? I certainly would be leaning towards more of purchase so that we are not locked in just to 5 years. I like to, if we can own it, I think it's more important to own it. That way we can see where we go from, if we need it more than 5 years, or it's a better investment, I think, over the long haul. But we'll be doing some number crunching later.
That's a question I was gonna have, is that I probably should know this, but don't. We have money, adequate cash balance now, because it would come out of our.
We
it
have
may come out of the
set
fund that we have to-
aside, when we were thinking about
This for the
building out
building.
the old
Okay.
fairgrounds, those monies have been set aside, if my memory serves correctly.
Mhm.
And those will more than adequately cover this
Yeah.
right here.
Yeah, so we would not be, because other way we would then be adding burden onto our
Correct.
current
If we
expense.
do not do a lease, we don't have a yearly out expense.
Yeah. Okay.
Is that correct? We don't have, we have the money, is what.
Yes, sir.
essence.
That's correct.
Okay.
For the purchase and the outfit. There's-
Right.
How much, in just ballpark, out of that fund we had set aside for the old fairgrounds, how much would be left over after we expended this amount? Ballpark,
Off the top of my head, I don't recall, because we kind of changed things around for the capital improvement plan for this year, but I can certainly get the answer to you.
Yeah, it's an estimate, because
After the
that's
meeting.
money would be available then if we wanted to do something still do something upstairs in the sheriff's building.
Right.
For the other remaining offices.
Any other questions? We have a motion to place this under new business for discussion and then approval of either lease or purchase. And then the second would be, if we lease or purchase, are we gonna lease it as is, purchase it as is, or lease with turnkey and purchase turnkey? So those are the things that we would need to decide come August the 16th. We have a motion, we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion, we have a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, sir. Mr. Morrison, if you'd like to come on the 16th, you're more than welcome. If we have any questions, if we just forward them on to Mr. Downs in case Mr. Morrison has other plans on that night. Thank you. As I see, we have completed everything except for the EDC under new business. Is that correct, Mrs. Honeycutt? Is there any other new business we need to cover?
Do we need to talk about the?
Reports.
Oh, I understand. We're going to talk about reports. why don't we talk about reports in regards to the animals, and then we can go into the EDC. right
Okay,
after
because
that.
I know that Ms. Beaker, I think, has to get over to Open Kitty City up at 5, so.
Right.
I believe so.
What we typically have done, or what we've asked to do, is receive reports from commissioners who serve as liaisons on different boards. I did want to update the commission on a couple of things, but I will do that at the close of all of our business today, just to let you know. At this time, I turn it over to Mr. Caruth, or Commissioner Caruth, to talk about the APPC, Animal Preservation Protection Committee, had a meeting last month, about a
Right.
week ago. Do I need to?
Yeah, I need to plug that in. And what I wanted to say is, first of all, is that we've had a lot of research done, a lot of discussions with many different people in the community since our last meeting. And I put together some stuff for our committee meeting that I wanted to go over with y'all. I am in the process of putting together some sort of resolution. It's a little wordy still, so I want to go back and wordsmith that some, bring it down a little bit more. But what we are looking at doing, and I just want to keep stressing to everyone, is that we have many divergent, and there's several different opinions on some things about how things should be done. And make sure you got the, there it is. And one of the things that looking at is that, and I hope I got the right one on there. If I don't, then we're going to be, I'll just get to talk. I do have my laptop here, so we may have to take a break if I
Huddle around your laptop. Is this it?
That's it, I think. Hopefully. You said okay. Click OK. Yeah, that's the right one. Okay. Anyway, what I wanted to do is just kind of go over what I talked about with the committee and to discuss the kind of some of the things that happen now and some of the things I've seen from reviewing some documents. And what I did is Patsy Beaker's here. I only want to have anything from her. And also Mr. Daniels went to the no-kill conference in Washington this week and got some information for the board members on Maddie's Fund, and which is a fund that's available. They provide grants. I think some groups in our community have tried unsuccessfully in the past to get funding from Maddie's Fund. And they basically fund collaborative efforts, community efforts for adoption programs, and they're listed in their fund several different programs across the country that they funded 2008, 2009. Anyway, what I started out with is kind of unrelated to that, but to show you, several years ago, we formed the Preservation and Protection Advisory Committee. And what happened, I took those numbers, we got the spay-neuter numbers, I mean, not spay-neuter, keep going back to that, it is spay-neuter, but I got the numbers for euthanasia from the report that was provided to us by the sheriff and their staffing study back earlier in the year. Took that, compared that to our population. And so what this shows is the number of dogs that have been picked up and euthanized per 100 population since, from 2004 forward. And you can see the bottom line on this chart are the number of dogs euthanized per 100 population. So you can see that number has dropped over the last 4 or 5 years. Also dropped is the number of animals that have been picked up. Bad news is that those two lines are not any further apart. So they're, one's going down, the other's going down at about the same rate. We can flip to the next one, Chairman. Here's the cat, same thing there. And there was a major effort. Both of these have been because of I believe one of the factors in this has been the community spay-neuter program we put together called SNPs, which is where we provided the vouchers to the indigent population that are on public assistance to get a free spay-neuter. And that program has increased. In the first year it was in place in 2006, about 32% of the vouchers were returned, and now we're up to 62% this past year of those vouchers were returned. So it took some time for it to catch on, but again, the good news, bad news. Good news, it's going down. The bad news is those curves are still have not shown any spreading, which leads us kind of to think about what are some other things that we can do. Okay. And then this was just combining the two together. Again, if you look at it just the raw numbers, they are flat. But with the population growth we've experienced, you can see where that has, seems to have some kind of impact. And of course, there's other factors involved as well. Okay. There has been a great deal of interest about what is in a no-kill shelter program, as far as what are the components. What I did is went and looked at those components and laid them out, and then looked at what we have currently in this community. And if you look on the left and right-hand side, you see that we, the No Kill Advocacy Center, promotes the idea of a feral cat called TNR program, which is a trap, neuter, and release, so that you eventually work through reducing the feral cat population in a community, which is probably one of the biggest areas of overpopulation of dogs and cats. We have had those events in the community, and those are put on primarily by the Humane Society, as well as Cabarrus Cares has done an event in the past with that program. We have also high-volume, low-cost spay-neuter programs, which we just talked about, as well as we have a clinic, spay-neuter clinic here in town that is run under the supervision of the Humane Society. Rescue groups, are prevalent in our community, as our foster care through those rescue groups. All of them, in some respect, have foster care programs where families can sign up to bring in a dog or cat for a period of weeks while it's waiting to be treated, or it can be prepared for adoption. They have, each of these rescue groups have their own individual adoption programs. Some of them more sophisticated than others, but that it does exist. We have a public education programs that are put on by many of the rescue organizations in the community. They include the Humane Society, Cabarrus Cares, and Cabarrus Pet Society. And then we also, that helps somewhat with the pet retention, and that's where, about half the animals that come into animal control are owner surrender. So it helps to identify if you have needs, that those things, that prevents you from keeping an animal in your home. Once you've adopted one, then we have ways to alleviate that, such as food programs for folks that have lost jobs that feel like they can't take care of an animal any longer. There is somewhat, though, of a fragmented medical and behavior program, of how, I think it's more based on individuals in the community that are providing those things and evaluating animals for their temperament, and they're used to do other things. As far as public relations and community involvement, really right now the organization get the most exposure is the Humane Society. It gets it through Channel 22, and there's a program that we have on there, I think it's once a week, that Your Pet and You, and so there is some exposure. The other groups don't get a lot of exposure, however, through the media. We do have a strong volunteer and community involvement, but it's through through these rescue organizations and or the Humane Society. That the only thing we don't have, we do have somewhat of a proactive redemption policy. It's not a formal one where the deputies, the animal control officers attempt to locate owners, pet owners, when they go into a neighborhood and they suspect an animal may be a pet. And we don't have a central director or somebody that is responsible for pulling the whole community program together. That's the missing pieces. And I feel like that's the base, for the most important thing that we probably should end up addressing. Okay. I think here's, like I say, the issues that we need to address is I think that we have, because we have so many different rescue groups that are doing adoptions of animals, a lot of them are doing adoption of animals that are surrendered directly to them. There is a perceived or a real limited access to animal control by rescue organizations other than the Humane Society. It's not to paint the Humane Society in a bad light. It's just that over the years, it's kind of become synonymous that somehow or other the Humane Society is the organization that gets animals out of animal control, that other rescue organizations can't go out there freely and review what animals are there and pull animals from animal control.
But that's not the case. I mean, anybody can.
That is, yeah, I believe.
It may be the perception, but that's not reality.
That's what I'm saying. It's a perceived and, it's kind of more of a psychological thing, I think, than anything. There's a lack of clearly defined adoptable versus unadoptable categories. So what happens is it's kind of left up to animal control at a point in time, maybe consult with a couple of private rescuers in the community to determine whether or not an animal is adoptable, should be euthanized or not euthanized. And a lot of times that decision is based on space and versus whether or not that dog has the temperament or health issues that would warrant putting the animal down. And so that brings up the clear protocols for determining the adoptability of dogs and how is that determined so that animal control has clear criteria for what can be released to the public for adoption versus what what needs to be kept and possibly euthanized. Okay. I think that what we should be looking at doing is moving towards adopting a couple of resolutions. One of them is the establishment, I say no-kill program. When I say no-kill, doesn't mean that you never have euthanasia. It means that you've determined and you're removing the obstacles in the community so that they do not, so that we don't put obstacles in the way of animals being adopted out. So that any reputable rescue organization can come into the shelter, pull those animals out, take them out, and then put them through an adoption process. So it becomes so basically opening the doors to animal control. The other one is adopting the ASLMR, I believe I'm pronouncing that correctly, accords, which mandate cooperation among rescue groups so that we, because there are many different, the reason I think there's a lot of times there's a lot of different rescue groups because every rescue group has their own philosophy how to handle particular animals. And so adopted some sort of thing that forces that unity to occur so that around the common goals that we have for the community of rescuing as many animals as possible out of the shelter. I said to create a position for a paid adoption director and volunteer positions. It may be that we can do this with a fully volunteer staff that would man a new shelter organization. That would be pretty much what they would do is when animals are received into animal control, they would take responsibility for evaluating them for their temperament, evaluating their health concerns, categorizing the animal, and then by maintaining a database of local and regional rescue organizations would then work to get that animal placed into foster care or into one of the rescue groups that can adopt that animal out. Okay? So looking at that, here's kind of the responsibility I see that would happen. You would have a community adoption director that would be independent of animal control. This person would cultivate that network of rescue organizations. They would establish the assessment procedures for all incoming animals, manage the disposition of the animals for adoption, oversee the spay-neuter programs, and maintain the shelter statistics that would be reported to the community on a regular basis. The rescue groups would have to be certified by the community adoption director in the state so that you would have criteria established. There's some rescue organizations out there that basically take dogs and cats and just put them in a barn. You want to have some kind of clear cut what they have. I said 501c3 and board governed. There are a couple of for-profit organizations in the community that rescue dogs and then train them to be service animals or to be bomb or drug dogs. And those, are for-profit, but those should be, I would include those as well. But they would have some sort of formal organization so that it's not just a single person decide, I'm going to start a rescue organization, and then they're overwhelmed because that separates the rescue organizations from hoarders who then come and just get more and more animals and have no way to take care of them or to make sure that they are properly cared for. That rescue group would operate the public adoption programs for the county. So when you went to adopt, if a person wanted to adopt an animal, they would come to animal control. Animal control would steer them, give them the list of rescue organizations in the community that do the public adoptions, and that's where they would go because the rescue organizations would maintain some sort of standard for how, for evaluating, checking references, and determining whether or not a family that wants to adopt is capable, or an individual is capable of adopting that animal and providing the care that's needed. They would also screen, maintain a foster network, and then I said about monitoring the adoptive families, but also help provide public education programs in the community. Like I say, most of them are already doing a good part of this, so it's a matter of just kind of formalizing kind of what their role would be to become a certified partner in the community adoption program. And then, of course, animal control, who is now doing some work to try to get some animals placed would then be freed up to go back to their core mission, and that is to address cruelty reports or complaints, collection of strays and wild animals that are in the community, looking at developing a more proactive redemption process because it would free them up to do that more. And then, looking at, of course, then talked about too, adding the net guns to their, we had a good bit of discussion about adding net guns as well as mobile microchip detectors that could be used out in the field. But they would be primarily involved with enforcement and would not be involved in the community adoption process. So, anyway, what, I guess, questions? Does anybody have? I know that everybody has heard this, has generally been supportive of it. There was some questions from the task force, the group, about, well, what do you do about, do we need a bigger shelter in order to accomplish something like this? And I can't honestly say I know that answer to that question, because I think that what you have is, what we're really looking at doing is having a virtual shelter, because you're moving these animals out into the community, but you may have to have a holding pen. And then Patsy pointed out to me earlier about that. If you've got some animals may be moved to other parts of the country, you may have to have a holding area where they're held for a couple of weeks until somebody can come and pick those animals up to move them out to other parts of the country. But that is one of the things I think that would need to be addressed, is how would you do that? Would you need a bigger shelter? I think that was primarily the big question. And, I pointed out that just because we adopt a no-kill community program doesn't mean that the minute we adopt it, the skies will part, the sun will come out, and suddenly every dog and cat will have a home. I think it's going to take some time as people get into the community, gets jazzed up over this, to see the numbers coming down. But I think if we're getting a report on those periodically, we set up the structure, I think over time it'll become, things will start to happen. We'll start to see things happening with the adoption program. So, any questions?
It is a concern of mine to label something no-kill when it's not no-kill. So that I don't, the name or the implication, and what we hear a lot nowadays is the perception becomes the reality, and I don't think that is correct in this instance when you have when we're talking about adoptability versus not adoptable, and not adoptable could be for health reasons, for the dog's behavior or the animal's behavior. If the animal's rabid, those are some things. And then another concern I have is, what if they're labeled adoptable, but they just don't get adopted? And I will, I can't imagine a more horrible situation than an animal that can be adoptable that is not adopted and just stays in a pen until it dies. That's a worse death. I can imagine that. So that in concept, it sounds good. If we can work on what do we actually mean, or changing the name, or learning about what maybe we talk about adoptability, or what the recommendation is, what's realistic, so those numbers can come down. Because I don't want to be in a situation where we have a lot of animals that are in cages that just will not be adopted.
There's, and that is one thing that I know that in reading in one community, and I'm sorry, can't remember which one it was that I did some research on, that, and this was part of the Aslamar Accords, because there was disagreement among the rescue groups in that community about what was considered adoptable versus non-adoptable. And what they did was they established clear categories for how you, almost like triage of animals when they come in. And like category, like that, I kind of said, okay, if you put them in 4 categories, category A animals are those litters of pups or kittens that come in that are perfectly capable with just a quick checkup, can be adopted today. Those, we always strive to get 100% of those out. Category B are those animals that may have some minor medical issues or minor behavioral issues. They pee on the carpet. Right. And that, they're not housebroken, or they you try to take them a walk on a leash and they basically rip your arm out of its socket. Where with 6 to 8 weeks of foster care or training or some kind of minor medical treatment where they may be infested with fleas or may need to have some minor surgery done, those dogs and cats then are category B. And, you know, with from short-term foster, they will be capable of being adopted. I think we move towards 100% of those being adopted out over time. Then you have a kind of a red line that's drawn. Category C are those dogs or cats that have severe temperament issues, more severe health problems. Is that, yeah, there may be some rescue group out there that's willing to take on that challenge. There may be a rescue group that does nothing but rescue pit bulls. They may want to come in and get those pit bulls and work with them that have been recovered from fighting situations. But you're not going to try, that category would not be, you know, if they come, they come. But we're not going to attach to them the thing of 100% adoptability, because it does take some special rescue groups or somebody with a special set of skills in order to rehabilitate those particular animals. And then category D are the ones with, you know, we suspect have rabies, are severe heartworm infested, have severe other severe health problems that just is just the resources to be spent on those are just too great to try to save those, or they're very young animals that are less than 4 or 5 weeks old that cannot survive away from the mother. You know, that's where you get into that category. And yeah, for those, I think that's the category you look at. What we're saying is that you move towards, you know, trying to adopt out and continue to strive to adopt out every animal you possibly can, unless it's just an impossible situation. But if you have a group of, I think, of rescuers that act as like our advisory group that define what those adoptability standards are, then the community recognizes that's the adoptability standards, and it's not something that is left up to just an arbitrary decision. But I think too, yeah, immediately I think you still would see some animals being euthanized that are fully adoptable, just because of the fact that you don't have the networks fully, you know, developed yet. But I think the public knows and understands that they play a role in going and getting those animals out and adopting those or opening their homes to foster care. You will begin to see more of those moving out. Plus that coupled with our spay-neuter programs, will, you know, you continue to see that animal population, I believe, go down.
Any other questions, or Commissioner Minot?
I want to say thank you to Bob for doing all this research and working on it. I think the ideas are wonderful. I think the goals are wonderful. I don't think we need to rush into them. I see a lot of issues that need to be clarified before we make a formal commitment to anything such as this. I'd like to see the committee you're working with, or whatever committee is formed, looking at all those issues, because I was thinking that you're going to have a very well-developed process for identifying animals, and not just animals, but who are the people who are going to be involved in this program. Will there be enough volunteers? We don't know. What are the liabilities? Who's liable for the shelter and someone injured at the shelter? Who's paying for this shelter? And you know, all of those issues need to be very clearly drawn out before we make a formal commitment. Another piece I'd like to see discussed and promoted is education in the community. And that's not just talking to people about spay, neuter, and taking care of their animals, but it would even seem to me to involve a little bit of lobbying for legislation on the state level that identifies what owner responsibilities are. What are people responsible if they have an animal? What are their responsibilities, and what are the consequences of not taking those responsibilities seriously? So there's a number of things I'd like to see researched and identified before we do anything formal, but I like the idea. I think it's the right direction to move. And I've got 2 feral cats if they want to come down.
I agree that to adopt a resolution may be premature unless, I mean, if we're going to adopt a resolution, let's put some teeth into it and know exactly what we're going to do and have a game plan laid out. I like the idea of what you've done. I do think that if we have a consensus among ourselves today, is that we move forward with getting some of these, getting the APPC or either more, continue down the path that they're doing to talk about these things that Commissioner Minich raised, and also what is the estimated cost and how is that going to be paid for? Is that, because I know that at one of our meetings it was thrown out is, do pet owners do the pets get licensed? When you go to the vet, is there an opportunity for people to donate instead of going the license route? It may fully fall within our budget right now, that we can afford it, or we can do that kind of program now financially. And I think that when all that is being formalized or narrowed down, it's going to get back to the question of euthanasia. And I think her name was Mrs. Brock, was talking about euthanasia at our last meeting. And do we get rid of the gas chamber? Is it safe not only for the owner, for the administrator, but also to do the lethal injection? So I think that I would like to see us have a better understanding about what's the practicality of, if there are animals that are not adoptable or that are not adopted by week X, then unfortunately we move forward to putting the animal down. And then how do we address that situation?
One of the things that I actually wondered about, right now the Animal Preservation Protection Advisory Committee is made up of one member at large in the community, and we have an ex officio member who is on staff at DSS that's kind of oversees the spay-neuter program from there. There's myself as the commissioner rep on that committee, and then you have a rep from the Humane Society, a rep from Cabarrus Cares. We have a veterinarian on the committee, and Patsy, who do we have a?
Two rescue groups, one vet, Taylor, and you.
Okay, but what I'm wondering about, because I know that one thing I've mentioned in our last meeting was the importance of this being a community-wide effort. If we should not form a separate task force up with just the particular mission of looking into how this would be organized. And in doing so, I'd like to, pull in, I think it made it just of rescue, people from rescue organizations or those that are rescue advocates in the community. And I think it would be a good way to pull in. I believe that, there's, besides the one we already have on the committee, but also reach out to some of the other rescue organizations and put together a committee of 5 to 7 people that would represent kind of this full spectrum of rescue organizations in the community and rescue advocates in the community to come back with some of these answers and to kind of put together what the organization would look like and how it would function and address some of the issues that maybe Commissioner Minott brought up and the rest of us may have.
Do you think you can get that together in 2 weeks? Is that too quickly?
I think we could propose.
We can if so, we can put something on for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
To
It's kind of a study to look at this more in detail and to study it and come back to us.
and
with
say this is the
summary.
dynamics of what we need
how
to
this
do.
would
And
look.
if it's something this board is comfortable with, we can vote on it and then start taking applications or what have you, starting in September, and keep our fingers crossed, appoint them in the middle of September and move forward with it. And if you're going to, in expanding or looking at other people, I think it's important to also, I think it's important that we talk to individuals in the community, not just animal rescuers or vets or,
to have some
and I would encourage that
individuals
if Mr. Daniels or Mrs. Juba would be willing to serve on that they be given the opportunity, because,
That's what I meant by advocates.
Well, I'm just saying, is that-
advocates.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, a few things that I wrote down was a question about lethal injection, also, because you didn't mention that, and I do think that needs to be discussed.
That's the 500-pound gorilla in the middle of the room, so, yeah,
Well-
we are gonna need to discuss it,
But it needs to be
Yeah.
discussed. I mean, I would much prefer to see us go in that direction also than the gas chamber. And the other thing I'd like to see is, I wrote down budget implications, which you already mentioned. And I'd like to see a timeline developed on, it's on how this is going to be accomplished. How long do we think it's going to take to be able to get something in place, and what are some kind of benchmarks along the way that we could look for to help, take this forward? I presume that there is someone from animal control on the committee that you currently have?
Yeah, there is.
Okay.
Yeah. Lieutenant Taylor is actually on that committee.
I mean, obviously, they are a part of this, and would need to be. We need to make sure that they are participating and giving their input and everything.
I didn't hear, but would it be good to have a kennel, somebody from the kennel representative, and would that?
From a commercial kennel, or?
Yeah, I mean, because they may look at it a different issue or a different way, I don't know. I would leave that to y'all. I'm just thinking is, I've got two that I'm constantly trying to look to place for when we go out of town or whatnot. But anyway, I think that would be good. Will you be able, do you think you can get it together by the 16th?
I think get together by the 16th of how that would, organization, what that would look like, that
Okay.
committee would look like. the
Yes,
task force.
Commissioner Privet.
I like to see a difference in what our current policy is and what's been recommended, to see the difference
Okay.
between the two.
Yeah, I don't know.
When you say policy, the policy of adoption, the policy of?
No, the animal control, our current policy in dealing with animals,
and is that
adoption,
through,
et cetera.
Adoption, euthanasia?
Yeah,
Okay,
Yeah, okay,
the difference between the two.
yeah.
okay. We can do that?
Yeah, we can find that.
We have a motion to place this under new business and title. How about, or do you just want to put it under reports?
Let's put it, I guess, new business, I would think. You know,
Okay.
that would be the approval of a committee or task force. for
Addressing
studying-
animal control. How about
Yeah,
that?
No-kill
Or-
shelter, no-kill shelter program. Or a community-wide adoption program. Okay.
Community-wide adoption program. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion, we have a second. All in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed? Motion carries. Thank y'all. Why don't we take a 5-minute break? Come back at 5 o'clock and we'll get started straight at 5 o'clock with EDC.
Well, we're grateful for the opportunity to present to you tonight. We currently have $250 million of potential new capital investment in Cabarrus County. That is projects that we're working on. We had a prospect visit here just the other day, and it was a $100 million prospect alone. One of the other projects that we've been working with would have been, one of the other projects that we've been working on just told us the other day that their project has gone away. And that happens a lot. Projects come and go. For example, Great Wolf Lodge was a project that came 3 or 4 times before it finally hit. And I know you'll be glad to know, I hope you've had the opportunity to be at Great Wolf Lodge. I think last year alone, Great Wolf Lodge paid over $667,000 in taxes in Cabarrus County. That's 3 times more than what the budget allocation is for economic development this year. I think the item before you is the contract, a little bit of history on the contract, and I'd certainly invite Mr. Day's participation, because sometimes my memory is not what it should be. I think the original contract we did back in 2004 was written by the county, and it was given to us, and perfectly fine. As we started this new agency, it was just de facto contract for economic development services. We signed it and got to work. Insofar as I can recall, there have been no changes to that contract over these 7 years. As we went through the county's budget process this year and discovered that the funding was going to be cut by just over 50%, then we began having discussions in particular about the contract. I think there were some concerns maybe that we weren't doing things that the contract called for. Issues of accountability were raised, return on investment, those kind of things. So Scott Lampe, who is our vice chair, our treasurer, met with Chairman White, kind of talked through what that budget was going to be and the amount of what the budget was going to be. And I think Scott began the first revision on the contract, and with very little subsequent change. The EDC board did vote on this contract last Thursday. Really all it does is just takes out some language. I don't know that it changes any of the responsibilities that your economic development organization has. Accredited economic development organizations all over this country do the same things. They create capital investment and they create new jobs. We can't do that without a lot of different partners, many in the public sector, like you, and many in the private sector, like Ms. Seyfried and Mr. Lampe, who represent two of our private investors. So, you know, even if you chose not to fund us at all, if we still want to be an economic development organization, we still have to do the things that make us an accredited economic development organization. And those agreements haven't changed with the other municipalities either. They're still the same agreements that they were all those years ago, because we're still going to, and I think the key issue is building strategic relationships among our internal audiences, our external audiences, and with brokers and developers and projects that we want to come to Cabarrus County, so that those tax dollars will come here, so that those jobs will be created here. And if nothing else, at least by the building that goes up and the number of people who are employed, if there was no other return on the investment, we think that that has been significant. So that's probably all the background I need to give, and maybe we just need to, you know, throw it back to you and see where this is.
Are there any questions for Mr. Cox or Mrs. Seyfried, Mr. Lampe, or Mr. McDaniels?
I don't have any questions at the moment. Well, I do have a question. I noticed that there were a number of deletions in your contract that referred to things that were cooperative type things, like working with the chamber, working with RCCC. There was one that looked like it was was going to be a planned effort to assist current local businesses, things that those types of wording were taken out, and I just wondered what the impetus was behind that. Hoping that you're not planning to eliminate any of those things. But I didn't see where that was put in different language elsewhere.
Yeah, I'll give you my take and then let Scott answer. All those things that you have just mentioned still appear in the other municipality contracts. We took them out of the county contract in part because if the county doesn't believe that we're doing those things, then we don't want to be held accountable in a much more difficult budget year if it's already assumed that we're not performing in that area. So the core economic development services that the county has funded are greatly limited by their funding. The $212,000 doesn't even pay for the 3 full-time staff people that it takes to do all of these things and more. So it was easier just to remove those things and go on, as opposed to leave all those things in there and then maybe at the end be judged that we had not done those things that the contract had required.
And if I can maybe speak to that, I actually took the first draft at deleting those, and a couple of those I remember specifically. One of those was a reference to workforce development, which quite frankly, we just, in my view, don't have the budget to do anymore. Now, having said that, I think one of the synergies we get from being in the building with the CVB and the chamber is that you get some of that stuff just anyway, and I think John is, in fact, I skipped a meeting they had a couple of weeks ago with RCCC in that area, but you know, we can't formally be obligated to that. One of the other ones that was in there that actually struck me as odd was this request for a database of vendors and suppliers to match up products and services that they could share with each other, which just struck me as not, while that might be a good idea, and that's probably, I just don't know as a practical matter how you could possibly do that. And even if you wanted to do that struck me as something that would be more properly done by the chamber. If anybody, and actually I believe the chamber actually has some programs around that with, you know, some of the buy local initiatives and that sort of thing that they've done. So we took that out, and I think John really hit on it, trying to get focused on, you know, I think we all believe that the core of what we should be doing is bringing new investment and new jobs to the community.
The next thing that I just wanted to say is not a question, but a comment. To me, there seems to be a disconnect in the way we're looking at what economic development does and how they do it, in that we're trying to say this was done and this was the result. This was the expense and this was what we got out of that expense. To me, that's a difficult thing to do for Economic Development Corporation, just like it would be a difficult thing to do for a business. And of course, I always will return to what I know the best. There is no way we know in our place of business when the fellow walks in the showroom whether he came into the showroom to buy the car because we sponsored the Intimidators, or whether we advertised in the newspaper, or whether we were, you know, provided ball jackets for their grandson's ball team. You can't quantify those two. You can't link those two things totally. And so to me, to expect, and maybe I'm wrong that that's the expectation, but it appears to sometimes somewhat be the expectation, that there be some definite traceable link between what they do and what the result is, what they bring to the community. I don't see that you can do that, direct tracing link, because what they're doing is marketing, selling, and it's just not something that can be done that way. So the best way to me is to take a look at what they've accomplished. And what they've accomplished over the 7-year, and it came to us once before in a previous presentation. We are, you know, just the amount of capital investment that has come to this county and the number of jobs that have come along with it has been tremendous. Now, you can say, well, they might have come anyway. Well, yeah, they might have. The fellow might have come in the store and bought and had never seen any of the things I was mentioning. You can't ever say that. It's just not something you can say or define. But the thing to me is that when I look at those figures, they've been successful. And so if they're being successful in the past, it doesn't make a lot of sense to ask them to do the same thing, or maybe even more, and heaven knows we need more right now than we need less. It doesn't seem to me logical to ask them to do or get or succeed more with less. I looked, for instance, at the Gaston County Economic Development website. Didn't have time to research any others, but they have 9 full-time employees in Gaston County. And yet we're saying to these folks, we want you to be more accountable with less. And that concerns me. And I will confess, and I've said this to others, I just wasn't paying attention and doing my job when we were discussing the budget when Scott was here before, in that I was thinking of their reserves, the desperate economic situation we're in right now, and thinking, okay, they can make it this year on those reserves, and we can move forward in the future. And then, of course, it was brought forward to me later, or I realized later, that that same lessened budget was going to be expected for the next 5 years. I think that's a very difficult situation to put economic development in. And that's just my personal opinions on these, and I guess that's the sum of my comments.
Are there any other questions?
Just wanted to, in looking at contacts, looking at hits, things that, the activity that we've seen, has it changed and transformed any over the last 4 or 5 years as we've watched? It seems like we're now further and further, we have more and more days between when you see big announcements for big manufacturing plants. And I've had some discussion with people out in the community about, is it, even though it's nice to get those, are we going to, how many more 500 employee manufacturing plants do we expect to see happening? And do we focus our efforts more on smaller businesses and on getting those, helping those to get started, helping those to grow and expand? I don't know, do y'all feel like that we're going, or we spend a lot of time focusing on getting the BMWs in here rather than the vendors for BMW? That type of.
I appreciate your
Yeah.
asking that question, and I appreciate your comments, Commissioner Minot, about the need to work harder right now to bring jobs to Cabarrus County. And your question is very pertinent. And I want to say I couldn't do without John and Ryan with what we do to try to recruit new people to Cabarrus County. It's impossible for us to do what we do without the support that we get from them. But sometimes the people that we're talking to now are people we cultivated 3-4 years ago almost, that we started working with then. So to try to come up with a matrix that every year asks you to say, okay, I worked with General Mills this year, I contacted them, Ryan contacted them, and here they are. It's just not going to happen. It's a long-term process, and I think we're going to have to work really hard to cultivate jobs in Cabarrus County. It's not going to be something that Ryan shows up at a trade show and he comes back with 500 jobs. Those days are gone. So I think we're going to have to work more strategically, and we're going to have to really rely on each other and the resources that we have here to bring jobs to Cabarrus County. And it's going to be really hard with the budget that we're being forced to adopt this year.
Commissioner Kruth, to follow up on that, a company like CBL Path, which expanded in Cabarrus County, I think only has maybe 12 employees, maybe 18. General Mills is coming with 10. Mallard Creek Polymers, I think the most they're going to get is 18. Pregel started smaller, and they've gone up. SBM Solar is a company that we've worked with, I think with 8 employees or 16, and they hope to grow. So, I mean, we can do a matrix and show you the number of employees, but I think your point's exactly right. The number of companies out there that create hundreds of jobs don't just happen, and they're not going to happen. That's why with a company like Celgard, we're very excited because it's over 225 jobs, $57 million of investment in Cabarrus County, breaking ground on, I think they've told us September the 2nd. We don't have any of the details yet, but September the 2nd. EDCs are set up to, generally speaking, set up to recruit companies that aren't here to come here. So generally, if you're looking at a company that's going to relocate somewhere else, they're going to have a couple dozen employees or 50 employees or a little bit more than that. Some of them will bring those employees from other places in the country. maybe the first 30, and then hire the next 50 from around here. ACN is an example, is a company like that. I think they brought about 50 people from Michigan, and then for their corporate offices, and they have over 500 people at the corporate office, and the rest of them have come from around the region, Cabarrus County in particular.
Any other questions?
Just trying to put it together in my head here, but I noticed in fact the last couple of weeks, getting noticed that Gaston and Lincoln County continues to get hits. And a lot of it's because they have, county-owned business park right on 321. And something I see that even though we partner some with the Oldham Group out at International Business Park, we don't do that. We don't have that here. We don't have a publicly owned business park in the community. Us or any of the cities do either. And I can't help think that hinders us somewhat when we're going head to head, and it forces us to have to drop back to do incentives, tax incentives versus
Well, Lincoln
providing
is
infrastructure
still
support.
doing incentives on top of providing sites at reduced cost, because they bought that property years ago, held it for industry, and they've been able to keep the prices lower. I think Gaston County, Gaston County provides, the county provides $2 million a year to their EDC, I believe, just to buy property. And then they're able to give greatly reduced land prices to companies that locate there.
I'd beg to differ in regards to the marketing, because if you're doing marketing and you're going to market for something, I think you look at an understanding about where that business is coming from and how that business is being driven, so that you know whether your marketing plan is working or not, whether it needs to be fine-tuned. I believe Mr. Michael Bafonsky from the CVB said they put in matrices that when they do out a marketing plan, they see how many websites or how many web hits they have. They see who's coming to their website. They see at the conferences where it's going, so that I understand that it's going to be cultivated over a period of time. But I would disagree that you can't put in a marketing plan. What are you marketing for, and how are you trying to accomplish that? And in regards to accountability, is apparently there was a marketing plan in the contract for several years now that's never been done by the EDC. So when you're asking about accountability, if just because it's in the contract doesn't mean it gets done. So I see that was taken out. It does concern me that the idea of this return on investment is taken out of the contract proposed by the EDC, because although you can't quantify when, there's been an assertion that General Mills has come here because of the EDC. Well, I would beg to differ. I think the research campus had a lot to do with that, and that I'm certain that a lot of sweat and late hours on the research campus efforts is the reason why General Mills is coming. But I do think that, if you're going to receive taxpayer money, we've got to know what we're actually getting for taxpayer money. Those are questions that we as a board need to ask. So that I think you got to look at that when you're looking at doing the same budget year in and year out on the same items. You're losing sight of the fact of where we are in regards to the economy today. I would imagine at Hendricks, y'all are doing things differently this year than you were last year. This year they were talking about a meeting amongst the owners about how do you keep costs down. At the research campus, y'all are doing things differently this year than you were doing last year. But so that what I'm saying is, in regards to the EDC, is what's in the economy? What's going on differently this year than last year, and how do you capture that, or how do you create a new market? And today you hear a lot about entrepreneurs. How do you develop entrepreneurs? How do you get those entrepreneurs to be successful? When we got the budget, when we got the presentation, we don't see anything about that. And is that a function of the EDC? I don't think is a function of the chamber, because a chamber is a member organization. So if you're not a member of the organizational member, then how do you get your voice heard in that organization to get the backing? So that these are all things I think that this board's going to be challenged with in the future about how do we grow the next Ben Minot Chevrolet from one dealership to 3 or 4. Or how do you get the entrepreneurs? There was an article in the paper this weekend about an entrepreneur that she's starting her own business. You know, those are the things that I hear time and time again, driving into work, coming home from work, seeing on the news, is that how do you create the environment to have people start up their own businesses that are going to succeed? I was sorry that was missing in the contract or in the proposed, and I'm not certain we have the updated version, because I thought that, and Mr. Lampe, you may be able to address this, that you pulled out the idea of providing jobs at or above the current Cabarrus County mean hourly wages. Was that removed? I think that was removed out of the latest draft.
It wasn't supposed to be.
Okay.
I mean, we may have.
You know, that if it was, that would be a concern of mine, is that it certainly needs, you know, as the jobs are sought after, it needs to be looked at, you know, that it needs to be at or above, because I think that's what
Well,
we're all trying to strive for.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's, you know, I think I had some discussion in my head about that, because I'm not clear, you know, if a company wants to come to town and they want to, you know, hire a couple of hundred people to do a project, and they're going to have some executives that are obviously going to make more than the average, and they're going to have a couple hundred, you know, semi-skilled assembly workers that are below the average. I mean, do we tell that company they're not welcome? So, I mean, I'm hesitant to say we're only interested in companies of any sort, and to try to lock it in and say, you know, we're only going to, by contract, only going to go after companies where all the employees are above average wages. I'm not sure we want to do that. But so there was a draft where I had scratched that out, and I put it back in because I know that's important to the board, and I think it's important to all of us. I mean, we're not, you know, nobody's out to, you know, actively chase, you know, minimum wage jobs. That's clearly not the thrust. And, you know, I think you have to take the changes that were made to this contract in light of trying to focus the discussion. I mean, I think myself and John and everyone at the EDC appreciates conceptually this idea that, you know, we shouldn't just be throwing hundreds of thousands of dollars at a problem. Now, you know, we could have our own debate about, you know, the efficiency of government in general, but, you know, there's no arguing the fact that, you know, we want to spend the dollars as efficiently as we can. And, you know, certainly I think the board is open to the idea of some arguments around the accountability or, you know, what sort of marketing plan and how we're tracking that. And that's all well and good. The flip side is, you know, we have 3 staff people and some of John's time. So we don't have, you know, lots of people to be writing reports about trips. I'm more interested in the staff coming back and working on the next trip and working on the next lead, as opposed to writing a report to deliver to the board or anybody else for that matter. You know, we want to have a focused return, and I think there's been a lot of discussion about metrics and, you know, let's track a lead from here and a lead from there. And again, I'm fine with that, but, you know, I think it still comes back to the 2 core things we're trying to do, which is create investment and create jobs. I mean, arguably, you could have written this contract in 1 page and said, you know, we're going to judge you on the amount that you produce. And while you can't do it year to year, as we all have said, you can do it over time. And I think if you look at, you know, and I think you just have to ask yourselves, do you feel like the $360 million in 2,000 jobs is enough? And that's where, you know, we have to be leaders. And us as board members have to look at John and his staff and say, is that enough? And you as board and as an investor, I mean, I do the same thing, right? Our company makes an investment in the EDC every year, and that's a question we make or that we ask ourselves. Now, granted, our contribution isn't nearly what yours is. But I think that's, that's what leadership's about. That's what being on these boards is about, is making those decisions when you don't, have clear-cut, objective evidence, and I don't think we ever will. I think government in general is that good. I mean, is there a report that says the county spent $200 million last year? Do we have a whole book full of metrics to track
Yeah,
that?
we
And
do.
I know you do. But what is the effort that it takes to do that? And we don't have the resources to do that. I mean, it's not as simple as we'd like to have that.
On the proposed marketing plan, we were operating under assumption that you were going to set aside some dollars for marketing that we could come back and approach you about and ask you to fund a marketing study. And so we brought Gary Walker and his team in 3 different sessions, a session with Scott. We brought him to the board. Gary made the presentation to the board. I advocated for the $24,000 marketing plan so that we would have the things that you're asking for. So at the end of the year, there'd be something that was objective that we could be measured against. And the board voted against it, so, which is fine, they're the board. I came back this month and in the budget, and in part they voted against it because the manager told us there are no other dollars from the county in a contingency fund that we can appeal to you for, and that the budget's flatlined for 5 years. So with that knowledge, they said, you can draw $50,000 or $75,000 of fund balance for the next 4 years and just kind of bleed ourselves dry. I tried to find a way to put that marketing effort back in this budget, which we did, and the board voted it down again. So I got the message, but we did put $5,000 in that budget to bring a consultant in and work with the board for a half a day, hopefully in September, on this very topic. So that is, even though it's not in your contract, that is something that we're going to do.
One thing you touched on, Mr. Lampe, that I think is important, that we can always look back on what we've done, and I think it's important to do that, but it's also to look forward about what we're going to do. My clients don't care what happened yesterday in court. They want to know what's going to happen to them tomorrow. And so that I can tell them all my heralds and all the cases I've won, but they don't care. They want to know if they're walking out of the front of the courtroom or the back of the courtroom, and what I'm going to do to walk them out of the front of the courtroom. So that I think it's important we have to understand where we've been, but also it's more of an idea about what is the plan for how we go forward, and what are the thoughts about how are we going to achieve that?
Well, and I mean, I have sponsors and race fans that feel the same way, right? I feel your pain. And you're right, and that's what I don't want, and I'm maybe speaking a little bit for Lynn as well, but I don't think anybody conceptually is against the idea of let's have a plan, and let's have an idea of, we have, some core industries that I'm sure John and Ryan can name off the top of their head. I can only actually think of maybe 2. So, I think.
Or the accountability part of it.
Yeah,
We're not opposed to that either. I
Yeah.
mean, we understand your need for that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that's not what the discussion is about. And quite frankly, I'm not clear, I think what this really boils down to is if, the question I have as a board member is, assuming we can create a framework and a reporting structure or whatever that looks like, where you feel like you're getting the adequate input or adequate reporting, are we going to continue in the business of economic development? Because I think most people on the board aren't clear whether that's something we're interested in doing or not, just fundamentally, right? And I think that would help. I think one of the things that would help just in general is if people felt like that we were at least pulling in the same direction. I mean, I think we can work through, what's the right plan, and are we investing enough time in local businesses? Do we need to have more focus on entrepreneurs? I mean, there's all sorts of ways to look at doing this, but I think, if we don't agree that we're going to sustain an effort, then all that becomes kind of a moot point. Because as we know, right, 4 years from now, we're out of money. So, and yeah, are there some more cuts we can find? Yeah. And where are most of those cuts? They're in staff people. And as you know, right, when you cut staff, you cut services. And that's where we're headed.
Just two other things that concern me that are not in the proposed agreement is or three things. One is the same, an audit and following accounting procedures.
Audit
I
should be
think
there. That's just an oversight if it's not in. We talked about that the other day.
The last agreement that I looked at, which was, anyway,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
had the audit taken out. It may have been put back in. If that is, that's great. And the accounting procedures.
Jay, there was
The agreement that I looked at, that I'm referencing,
Yeah.
is the agreement that was sent to me on Monday, the 26th.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was what's that acronym, John, I asked you the other day?
GASB.
Yeah.
General accounting.
Correct. That's an audit
government.
procedure for governments, and our auditors have said since that is much more intense than the audits that they do. And we don't receive $500,000 from any one government, so it's not actually needed. It just costs a lot more money for them to ensure that it is whatever you said it was.
Yeah, I don't see it in here.
If it's been put back in, that's fine. I just think that we need to have an audit.
Yeah, we
Especially
agree.
when we're talking about taxpayers' monies.
Yeah, we agree. That's an oversight.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I did change it from GASB, which are government accounting standards, because of what John said, and should have just
John
changed it.
J or Don Cox?
Sorry.
Okay.
And changed it to a
And then
general
also,
GAAP audit.
and apparently the agreement's changed, I don't know, the non-committed funds.
Yes.
That paragraph was taken out of the prior agreement.
Yeah,
which
there was
a
actually
concern.
sort of two related things there. There were several references to payments where it would say, a payment up to X amount. And that phrase was in several places. I scratched all of those. And then there was this non-committed funds, which quite frankly, I just didn't really understand what that was, especially in a year when we're having to pull from fund balance. I mean, by definition, there are no uncommitted funds. I guess theoretically, we could potentially, and to be honest with you, I'm a little uncomfortable with this idea that there's the county's money and the city's government and the private investors' money. I mean, it's all the EDC's money, so I'm not clear. I mean, there's no way we're not going to spend $212,000 because we can't pay the people. Just the people in the rent are almost $300,000. So I wasn't sure how that was still appropriate.
The only thing that I look at it as that if there is a fund balance at the end of this year, in any way, shape, or form, what happens to those monies? And as it relates to taxpayers' money, again, it gets back to is government should not make a profit. You gotta keep it as low as possible. And if that profit is coming from, or if that balance is coming from another source other than government, that's fine. I mean, I'm not saying that the investors didn't put in more money than they needed to, in essence.
Right.
But as it relates to county government, I don't know how you break it out, because that's how you got the fund balance so far, is either you did better than expected, you didn't spend the money where it was where y'all thought where y'all were going to spend it, or you pulled it out of some area.
Right. Yeah, and that's a good point, is, the fund balance that's there, I could argue that was all private investor money, right? And so that's why I'm a little, that's why I was uncomfortable with that description of and that's why I didn't particularly like the analysis, but I did think it was kind of addressed your question of, if these are the services that you're asked for through this contract, I don't think anybody doubts that, and you've seen our budget, that is in excess of $212,000, and has been for years. That there won't be any uncommitted funds. I mean, if it'd make you feel more comfortable to have that in as some kind of, just a what if, that's fine, but I just don't want to have, I wouldn't want you to have unreasonable expectations that somehow there's going to be.
I imagine if your budget's cut by half, then it's going to be squeaking.
Yeah, I mean, we can put that back in.
Mr. Chairman, I hate to, but I need your permission, please, to excuse myself. I've got to get the pharmacy before it closes.
Okay.
I didn't realize I'd be here this late.
Okay.
Sorry.
I'm sorry, and I
I'd
have to
go
go with
too.
him because I'm riding with him, so I guess we're leaving him here.
Great. I'll make up some answers.
Well, I think.
Sorry.
If Lynn were here, she'd have said.
Yeah. They're in trouble now. Say whatever I want.
Well, I don't know if there's any other questions or any other,
I just got
wouldn't
some
say
things
concerns, but, issues being raised as a result of the agreement.
I think some observations I wanted to make was that first of all, I think that the admin details of accountability, I think something we can continue to hammer out to get to where we need to be as far as what we would like to see as far as reporting back to us as far as accounting. That's, to me, I think that's minor stuff that can be worked out. A couple other things, though, from my standpoint, I'm looking at is that we as a board, I'm not talking about Scott, Ryan or Lynn or anybody, I'm talking about us five that get elected by the people, is that what do we, and we've had a lot of transition in our local economy, a lot of transition what our focus is. I mean, I remember 5 years ago, or 6 years ago, I've got 4 shirts hanging in my closet at home that have the big race, the American flag, Center of American Motorsports. That's no longer the logo of the county. We were at one time gaga over motorsports.
I'm disappointed about that, by the way.
But we don't, but somehow or other, that's not, then we've gotten gaga over local agriculture. And now we're starting to have some kind of thought about local entrepreneurship and local businesses. But we as a board, I think, have got to determine what do we want to see? I mean, are we still wanting to see smokestack industries, the traditional, going after the big pieces, or do we want to go smaller with that? That's one thing. The other thing is again, I brought this up in our budget meetings, is that when we did cut back the EDC and we did it for 5 years, it's flatlined for 5 years, it's not going to be any more, there's no restoration of the funding levels at all, then we're making the decision, whether we realize it or not, that we are going to be cutting back on our economic development efforts. And is that something that we as a board want to do? And that's where I think it comes down to it, is that we just have to understand that there's not, we can't, I mean, we're going to have to, I think as us as a board, I think that coming up for us, and even though there was some talk about it early on in the budget process, we really didn't see those numbers until, mid-May.
Right.
And now it's late or early August. Also, on top of that, is that we've done it the last 3 years, is that the contract comes up for renewal the same time the budget does, and we can't disperse any funds until we have an agreement. I think we need to look at moving the date of the agreement through the extension this one time off of June 30th, so it's separated from the budget, when the date the budget becomes effective, so we have time to make any changes before suddenly more funds are needed from the new budget. And also, I think we've got to, as a board, think about what we want to do. And I see the target industries list. Is that still our target industry list, or do we say, nope, we don't want big manufacturers anymore? We want you to just go after financial services, or we just want you to go after agriculture-related industries. We want to focus it down more.
Right.
I mean, it's kind of like a phrase I use a lot in putting the Cadillac engine in a Volkswagen. I consult a lot with people on improving safety and risk management programs, and I say that you can't exceed that. Program can't exceed what the management capacity is, and that's what we got to look at. Do we ask the EDC to do 50,000 things using a shotgun blast when we maybe as a board need to narrow down what we want the focus of EDC to be? And then that way, possibly even with in reality of the funds we've given them, they can focus those funds more clearly. And use a rifle shot versus a shotgun blast, in recruiting.
in regards to the 5-year budget, those are just proposals, or that's
Yeah.
just a recommendation. We haven't approved, that's exactly what's going to happen.
Yeah, I
So
know that, but I mean, there's nothing showing there that's a pretty good amount of money if we're not gonna, if we're looking at not restoring that.
I look at it on a year-to-year basis as to where we are and sort of what we're trying to accomplish and where, what funds do we have to address that issue, that area. I do think that it would be good to, we had this same issue last year somewhat, is that trying to get an agreement worked out that, and I do think it needs to change, is that we have the CVB, we have DSS, we have a lot of different independent budgets that come to us already approved, the Health Alliance, prior to our June meeting. And y'all just got y'all's budget approved last week.
That's right.
So that, I don't think it was presented to y'all until
Well,
the month before.
Yeah, as a practical matter, we can't really approve our budget until we know what your budget is. That's going to be hard to, now, having said that, as your percentage of the total budget shrinks, our ability to do a better budget without your input is obviously going to improve. But, when you're still going to be, 25 or 30%, it'd be hard to really finalize a budget without, a commitment from the county.
But I do think that maybe moving off, I don't know what's the best way in regards to the agreement. I do think that if we could look at a potential 12-month agreement or 24-month agreement, that's a little bit longer, and if the funding changes, that's the only thing that changes in regards to the number. It goes up, or it goes back, or it goes down, or it stays the same. If it stays the same, the contract stays the same for the next 2 years. But I do think that one thing that we have lacked, that we have not gotten, is at a minimum quarterly reports about where we stand. What's the environment out there? So that I think that would be, that has been in the contract. It's proposed to still stay in the contract.
Right.
Hopefully that
Yep.
can be, that can be addressed, that we actually do have quarterly understanding where we are and what, or not we, but where the EDC is.
Yeah, no, that, we've actually already, Lynn and I have talked with John about doing that. That's something we're gonna do. Just, as you said, it's here and we weren't doing it, and we ought to do that.
But I think we've talked to the schools about doing, at least with schools, I think it was school constructions, I'm not certain, Commissioner Poole, you may correct me, but trying to mirror the 5-year plan with their 5-year, with a 5-year plan they have there. Maybe if the EDC could look at, what are y'all looking at over the next 5 years? And at least with the proposal of, this is where the budget is, at least money coming from the county. If more money is pulled in from the cities, that's great.
All right.
At this point in time, it sounds like there's some issues that we need to work through in regards to this agreement. Funding is important for the EDC. What if we were to modify this agreement from 12 months down to 3 months, work out whatever issues that we have for the balance of the year or longer? So that way funding can be created for the EDC, or funding can be coming in on the EDC. What happens
3 months,
is,
like July, August, September, 3 months?
right,
Or,
well, we have, July has already come and gone, so it'd be
Right.
4 months. We could do October, but
Okay.
between now and middle of October or beginning of October, or even sooner, if we can work out what Commissioner Caruth was saying is what is this board looking
Yeah.
at for future EDCs?
yeah, our plan right now is to have in fact, we were looking at some dates in September to have a half-day. Lynn and I haven't been a huge fan of let's hire some marketing company to do a marketing plan. We've been more in favor of let's have the board and maybe with, and let's have a discussion about what do we want. And I think, our assumption has been that the county manager, I don't want to say speaks for the board, but at least, provides that input from your board. But, if any or all of you want to come to that event. We don't have it scheduled yet, but, you know, you're more than welcome to come participate. The idea being, let's have our plan together, and let's know, you know, what we want to do, and do that with our group, as opposed to hiring somebody and having them go around and interview, and they plop this, you know, thing on your desk, and we're $24,000 poor. You know, we think we can, you know, buy some snacks and crackers and spend $1,000 on a facilitator and get there, get as good an answer, and I'd argue better answer, to try to do that. And I think, you know, we would certainly be open to that. I think, you know, that basic understanding of you know, what are we trying to get to is important.
Do you think that will change whatever comes out of that group, do you think it'll change or potentially change the agreement with the county? Or do you think it would be better to have a short-term agreement until October, find out what comes out in September, and then kind of finalize and iron out? Because if y'all make a U-turn or right turn or left turn that's contrary to what we've agreed to for 12 months, then we're back to square one.
Oh, yeah. I mean, my preference would be to do this, to get, you know, to get the funding going, and let's get on the road. And, yeah, I mean, I'd be perfectly happy to put this in a shredder and start over. And not because there's not good stuff in here, but because, you know, I think one of the things I struggled with in trying to make some edits here was, you know, I would have to call people and say, you know, how did this get in here in the first place? And it's a combination of the history, which I wasn't really always a part of, and kind of standard language that gets thrown into agreements, and the things we really care about. So, our attorneys at work get mad at me because I'm willing to do deals off of letters of intent, and they want to go write all these huge contracts. And, you know, my view of the world is
everywhere.
Yeah, I mean, we can create a
value
bullet.
to legals.
Not that there's no value there, but, you know, I guess my point is, you know, to me, that's the kind of approach that would make sense here.
Well,
I guess can I jump in here just real
Sure.
quick? What I understand you're saying is that would hammer out a short-term agreement and then work on the long-term. I was wondering, with all the stuff that details had to go into that, trying to get that short-term agreement, you know, ways gone so far, we could very well get to the end of that period and still not have a short-term agreement, you know, hammered out. Would it be better to just extend the current contract through the end of October, and then
we can just do what we have here instead of on page 44, which I have up here.
Yeah.
Instead of saying July 1, 2010 to June 30, 2011, just take June 30 out and put in October 31st.
That's,
I mean, and we go.
Then they go with their retreat.
Provided the audit, well, we don't have to mess with an audit between now and then, I don't think.
We'll be starting that.
Sir?
It'll be close. It'll be close to being done.
But that was under the old
Yeah.
contract. Right.
That was one of the things I
So
changed that. We were taking too long.
If we can just
do
put in, change that from June 30th to October 31st.
Right.
Between now and October 31st, y'all have y'all's meeting.
Right.
Or retreat, or whatever you want to call it, and then we can iron out the differences. What we can do is, if, I don't know who from the EDC board would want to meet, but it could be you and Lynn and John Cox, or you and John Cox, and, you know, somebody from our board plus John Day to talk about those issues.
And now, you know, I want to be fair to the rest of the board members here. I mean, you know, to a certain extent, you know, the county's sort of the 800-pound gorilla in that you have all the money, so you get to kind of set the rules. But, you know, I don't want to just totally ignore, you know, the input from the city and the county. I mean, my hunch is, you know, Mike Legg and the city of Kannapolis is very interested in us staying focused on biotechnology. And I don't want, you know, I don't want to have a group that we sit down and that doesn't get included, right? I mean, so it's not, you know, so I guess what I'm saying is that I like that structure and I like the idea. I'm not sure that group can walk away with a definitive agreement.
Okay. Well, go ahead.
Yeah, I would like the idea of their board and one representative from each of the funding municipalities in the commission meeting and just talking about, start out with, you know, what is the what is it that everybody wants EDC to do? And that's gonna be a huge amount, and you obviously can't do it all. So how do you choose the priorities? How do you make the priorities? And then how do you grow EDC in the future so that they can continue to add the things that are desired by the whole county? Because, you know, currently I just don't feel like I understand enough about what the cities are wanting. I've never heard them discuss it. And I just feel we need to be part of that conversation.
I have no
somehow.
problem. I think that Mr. Cox said earlier that when you were asking about workforce development and working within the city, he said, well, I wanted to take that out of the contract because the county didn't think we were doing it. So, but it's in the city's contract.
Yeah, we
Well,
left it.
that concerns me, is that if that's his take on it, that, well, if we can't live up to the county standards, then we'll just take it out of their contract, but we'll live up to the city's standards. There is an importance of the cities and the counties being on the same page regarding the EDC, and I do think it's important that we do have that. It's just that if there is an understanding about where we're going to go forward with this, it needs to be equal and it needs to be above board from everybody, not just with, well, if you ask more of me, then I'm not going to do it for you, I'll do it for the others, because they don't ask as much.
I think that we need to, the main issue is transparency and communication. And, I mean, that's what's already been said. I think you're right. Yeah, I think it is important that the municipalities who contribute, that we all have a chance to talk, all of us, you know, the cities, the county, and the EDC board, and make sure we do agree on what we think, how we think we want to go forward. I mean, I think economic development is very important. I think you raised the question that there's a question of whether or not the county thinks that's an important effort or not. I think it is an important effort, and I don't think there's anybody in here that disagrees with that. But I just don't think that there's been enough communication along the way for us to feel like everybody's kind of going together instead of pulling separately. And whether that's the meeting that you're planning in September to make sure everybody's together, or whether it's something that we as the county tries to facilitate, I don't know. But I do think that we need to be more focused, and we need to decide what do we want to see in Cabarrus County and all the municipalities working together, because that's what it's going to take. We've talked, as far as the commission goes, and with Mr. Day about the small mart. That was your book that you brought up to begin with, and we've talked about that and efforts along that lines on what we're going to do locally. And that particular book and the author are talking to, I don't know if you're familiar with the Small Mart Revolution. It's one nod, yes. It's interesting. It's all right, but it's an interesting book. But you know, that's kind of the same thing. Is where do we want to go? Do we think that that's where we need to be, looking at the smaller entrepreneurs or the big companies? I mean, obviously, we need something to happen to the Philip Morris property, but I think the future of this area in the United States is going to be more smaller than it is going to be larger. When you talked about accountability, I mean, I would think that, Ryan, that you plan out, I was looking at what the CVB had on the trade shows and things that they were going to participate in. I would presume that you have that. You can look out 12 months, 24 months on where you think you're going to be. And I would presume that with the EDC board that you are reporting back as to how things are going, and if it takes 3 years to develop a relationship with whatever company, and I don't have to know the name of the company, I'm not worried about that, but you know, if it takes that long, then obviously you're tracking it. So I mean, there is data that you've got available that you're already generating just as a result that you want to keep your job and you want to make sure of that. So there's some information that should be more easily shared, I guess. And like I said, I don't need a name of a company, but it's just trying to validate. I mean, what I hear as a commissioner, whether it's this issue or whether it's the animal control issue or whether it's any other issue that comes before us. I think the general public doesn't really understand what the EDC's doing, and they hear, you know, that's my taxpayer dollars too, and that's what we keep getting beat over the head about. And so, you know, I don't think any of the discussions we've had so far have been trying to single any group, your group out, or in any of the other discussions, other groups out. It's just a matter of the need for transparency with the citizens that put us in office. And because you operate, you know, separate, though, with county dollar funding, and there is that secrecy involved in what you do, a lot of people just don't really understand it. So I think that's kind of what's driving it more. And I don't think any of the questions that are asked by anybody here or by the members of your own board are meant to be negative or accusatory or whatever term you want to use. I think it's just a matter of trying to get information out. And to some degree, y'all have to sell yourself, whether it's to us and it's also to the community, because that's who wants to know what's going on. Those are the 10%, 10.8% that we have unemployed right now. That's what they're looking at, and that's what they're looking at us to do. So, you know, I think you have accountability, ways to provide accountability that's really not a whole lot different than what you're already doing. I do think we need to work with the city leaders and figure out what we're going to do. I like the idea of doing a short-term contract to make sure that you get paid. Yeah, I mean, because I think that's fair. I mean, we want that to happen. It's not that we don't want that to happen, but we do have a legal issue that we keep getting reminded of, and I think that, you know, we do our retreat in January, but we need to. Our board is going to turn over come December. I'm tongue out at you again now, but you know, I mean, there are going to be different focuses, but we've got to work. We're trying to work real hard as a commission, I think, to communicate with each other more, and that's what we need to do with you guys too. So.
And I'll be glad to speak to the board report. Scott hates my board report because he says I goes on too long. He's tired of hearing about it, but we do give an overview of what we did that previous month or that previous period in between board meetings, as well as upcoming events, who we're partnering with, where we're going. Then we have a project breakdown. We break down domestic or international, where that project was sourced from, as well as the target industry. So I'll be glad to get the copy to John and Kay, so you can distribute that, you know, the day after the board meeting or the board meeting. That's not a problem at all. And we keep it's aggregate data, so you won't be seeing the actual company names. We'll send you the company names if you want them, but we'll be glad to absolutely provide that information.
How long has it been since there has been a meeting of members of EDC and the municipalities and the county all at one time to talk about the goals?
We had the mayor's event.
It would seem to me that would be something that you'd almost want to do on a 5-year or
It's never been that I know of.
on a
I
periodic
know that
basis,
I've
so
been
that everybody is on the same page, because I think that's part of what Liz is talking about.
I know that prior to this meeting, I've been
Right,
trying to get in touch
We're not real
with.
sure about each person's
Yeah.
role or,
Prior to this meeting, I've been
goals.
trying to get in touch with Mr. Cox to set up a meeting, and he has not responded back to me about meeting
well,
dates.
but that's not what I'm
As-
referring to. I'm
Well, I'm
not
talking about
referring to
the-
just, you were talking about meeting with him.
In regards to these issues and
Right.
trying to get some of this worked out.
Right, but I guess I'm thinking of what the idea of having, if they're gonna have a retreat, having representatives there from the municipalities and the county to try to give our input. And of course, before we go to that retreat, we
Right.
need to know what that input should be, so that whoever our representative is giving a consensus,
Well,
conversation.
Commissioner Cruz?
Yeah, just, I want to add to that, kind of, is if you look at page 42, the agreement, paragraph A2, and it's interesting, because that very simply says, use targeted industry list, and it goes into a whole list there, down at the bottom, in the parentheses, to guide activities and expenditures. And if we look at that list, and I'm just going to put this example, and Hugh and Karen, this is an example, I'm not saying we'd necessarily eliminate this one, but say we go in there and say, we don't want defense industries recruited anymore. then that should be able to tell Ryan that next year for whatever defense contractors conference or whatever the trade show, you just strike it off your list. You're not going because we're not targeting that.
That's right.
And that's why I think it's important from our role as the Board of Commissioners as well as the city councils
Right.
for us to come up, and I think that should be updated at least every 2 years, that we should be developing and modifying that target industry list. Because if we want to say, well, we want to recruit, agricultural suppliers, we want to add that to the list, we want to add agricultural equipment manufacturers to the list, then we should do that as a board, our board, not EDC, but us.
Well,
Because that gives them a chance, then you take that, again, you're going from a shotgun blast to a
Yeah.
rifle shot.
Yeah, and I think the most, perhaps the most efficient way for that to happen is, John Day is on our board, and he's there every month and provides that feedback. And I think, if there's an industry you want to track, John Day can do that. I mean, he's there. He does. I mean, I shouldn't say he can't do that. He does do that. And so I'm not. And I guess what I'm saying is I think we already potentially have a mechanism in place. I mean, we may need a little bit of a reset right now and bring a larger group together. But I think, at least, we have. That's the reason why we put all those whether it's a county manager or a city manager or whatever. On the board. I mean, if you look at the composition of the board, it's essentially the people who either put money into it or who, have a serious vested interest in it, and we try to have each of those managers as a reflection of the, whichever municipality or governmental entity they represent as best we can.
One thing that, and I was just, it hit me, and it's something that I think and Chairman White pointed out a moment ago, a little bit ago, was like on this target industry list, in and of itself, the research campus is a recruitment plus. And they're out there for their folks, and they may go and get a company that has 10 employees, a General Mills or some other research-related company. Do we need to say, okay, we're going to say, we know that's happening, that's going to happen there. Do we take our resources that we're given to the EDC and say, let's go after other industries that aren't, in other words, eliminating kind of redundancy that might be occurring. That way we're not everybody's not all resources aren't focused on just going after one thing. Saying, okay, we're going to go over here, and then since you guys are working on that, we're going to go over and work on this industry and target this industry, this year.
Did you know, I thought you said you did not know, that the September meeting had not been set for the EDC?
No, John just sent an email to me this afternoon with a list of like 12 days in September. I mean, that's how, and just said, hey, can you pick, I think he was trying to get Lynn and I squared up on 3 or 4 dates and then was going to send it out to the rest of the board.
One thing this board can do is we can meet prior to that, so that when Mr. Day goes to that, I don't know what you're calling it, a retreat or whatever y'all are calling it, to get together.
Retreat has a bad connotation. It's going to be a strategic planning session.
Okay. So that when we can talk, and then he can present our views or issues, and then if any one of us can make that, then we can go that, and then that would be added as well. That may be something we can do, but once we know that date.
Well, I was going to, I think I heard earlier, you guys are having another meeting mid-month?
We'll have it August 16th as a night meeting, yes.
Okay, well then anything in September would be fine. Okay.
Yeah, and then we have a meeting on September the 6th as our work session, and we can just, excuse me, that's Labor Day, so I don't know if it's September the 7th or.
They got 7th, I believe.
Yeah, we have it September the 7th. We can just, at the very tail end of that, have a round session on the EDC, and that's prior to y'all's.
Absolutely.
And that if Ryan wants to be here to answer any questions that we may have, or
Be glad to.
that may help as well. Why don't we plan on doing that? Comments, Mr. Day?
Yeah, as the senior EDC board member in the room.
Exactly. Yeah, why weren't you sitting over here? You don't need,
I would like to make a couple of observations or comments. The issue of the targeted industry list was brought up. And to be honest with you, I can't remember the last time the EDC board discussed that. There was discussion at the last meeting last week about the importance of accountability, ways in which that might be done, enhancements that might be available that could be used and could be helpful. And I would say that in the last 2 meetings that have occurred, there's probably been more discussion in the EDC board meetings than there have in the last 2 years at least. And I mentioned that to raise an issue that I think is very important. That is that over the years, there's been a lot of good folks on the EDC board. What there hasn't been necessarily is the kind of engagement of those members that there could be, and the kinds of new programs or innovations that might happen as a result of that engagement. And that's one of the reasons why at the last meeting I suggested we have a facilitated retreat, and thought that that is a good alternative to a $24,000 expense that may be good and may not. You know, why don't we have some discussion among ourselves first, and kind of look at the talent that's in the room, and the expertise that's in the room, the knowledge of the community that's in the room, and see what we can come up with someone that's facilitating, that knows what they're doing and knows about that field. That kind of engagement, I think, can have a significant impact on the success of EDC and the success of the community. And it might be the case that if the board engages, the EDC board engages in that manner, develops a program that seems to have, and develops a program that there are reasons for behind that, and strategies behind that, and metrics behind that, then it's the kind of thing that might actually be helpful to gather representatives from the municipalities as well as the county to hear that. Why do we think that's important? Why is one segment of the economy more important to target than another? Why do we think that makes sense here? I don't know that we've really had that discussion. We had an expensive study that was pretty bad done several years ago that was funded by the state that identified some target industries, and before that there was another one that even targeted, said that mattress manufacturing was a good industry for us to target. So, you know, I think that the skepticism that the EDC board members and Lynn and Scott in particular had about, you know, another study like that is justified. So, you know, I think that there's a lot to be gained from the path that we're taking now. I did want to read a question that came from the Institute for Emerging Issues that NC State has, and you're probably familiar with that group, but they focus on a different sort of topic or subject that's important to the state each year. And this year they had brought in folks from all over the country to talk about entrepreneurship and the creative economy and the knowledge-based economy. And the report that they put out essentially ended with this question: how will North Carolina move from an economic development strategy focused on company branch recruitment to one that grows creative workers and entrepreneurs? And I'm not saying that there's not a place for recruiting the branch companies, but what I am saying is that there's a very important element related to creative workers and entrepreneurs that not only builds a sound and resilient local economy that's less subject to the sort of global influences that we've been experiencing over the past 2 years, but that kind of economy gives you a competitive advantage when you're trying to do that recruitment of those knowledge-based industries. And that's not a discussion that we've had at the EDC board, and it's one that we need to have. It's happening elsewhere. You know, it's happening at other levels, and it's to some extent happened with the Board of Commissioners. So I think there's potential there to do some things that haven't been done to improve the workings of the board and the organization itself, despite the cut in funding. Sometimes when that happens to you, it provides an opportunity to do things differently. And sometimes those different ways of doing things can be more effective than the other ones that you've used. So I'm optimistic about the direction that we're headed.
I think the biggest thing, as a person who's involved in some site selection decisions, the biggest thing you can do is have a low tax, well-functioning government and good schools. And those two things will be, I mean, right? I mean, if Ryan wants to have something to hang his hat on when he's out talking, those are the two things. And there's not enough money you can throw at it. And I mean, and to your point, that's the most important thing. And the EDC is a part of that. I mean, I've always said there's no new company or new deal that happens in this company or in this county solely because of the EDC. But the flip side is true, is there aren't many that would happen without the EDC. And so it's got to take all the pieces, and we got to have all the pieces in place. And I think we're heading in that direction.
Well, what we'll do is we'll talk about it at our September work session meeting. As it relates to the agreement that we have before us, do we want to place this on? Do we want to place this under new business or under the consent agenda? Once the corrections have been made in regards to the short-term aspect of the agreement and the audit, to make certain that that is in there, or not the audit, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, our board, at the last board meeting, on the assumption there'd be some changes, went ahead and empowered John and Lynn to work with the county manager to come up with the definitive agreement. So we're ready to go.
Okay. Well, do we want to put?
I'm okay putting it under consent for, if you want to do 4 months till October 31st.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, we've talked about it, I don't think, I'd be real surprised if we have a whole lot of changes in verbiage.
I wasn't anticipating any changes. I was just anticipating make certain that we did get to see it, we did get it presented, we did get to look at it. But if we get the changes prior, if we get it next week as quickly as Mrs. Honeycutt typically works, then we'll be able to look at it. So we can place it under the consent agenda.
And I don't mind it being under new business, but I don't expect it to be a 30-minute conversation under new business. So
do we have a motion to place this under consent agenda?
I would make that motion.
I'll second that.
We have a motion, we have a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed. That concludes.
I want to make one last comment. When we had our retreat in January, I said then, I'll say it again now, I hate the term the new norm, but that is what we're dealing with. And I think that's what, from our discussions, again, it's not that we're trying to be the gorilla, but we're having to change what we're doing from a county perspective. And I know that the CVB is changing from their perspective because everything's changed. There's nothing the same from what we thought it was going to be just a couple years ago. And that's kind of where, I think John's comments are good and your comments have been great, that's what we need to do. We need to look at it and decide where do we really want to be. There's no way that things are going to stay the same. So we need to go ahead and figure out how we're going to make this work for everybody, because Diane wants to sell some property and everybody else that has a real estate license. There are a lot of people that have a vested interest in what's going to happen with this partnership.
Anything else? Do we have a motion to go into closed session to discuss threatened or pending litigation, number one, and number two is to discuss matters relating to location or expansion of industries or businesses in other areas served by the public body, and invite Ryan in. Mr. Lampy, would you like to go in to discuss further EDC projects?
Yeah, I thought you were talking about litigation.
No, the second part of it was the EDC. And invite Mr. Lampy. We have a motion, we have a second?
Second.
All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion carries.